Hello everyone. We meet again on the journey following the turbulent and intense love story between the cold, yet resilient CEO James and LyTuDiep, a brave young woman with a heart full of scars. In the previous episode, the storm seemed to subside when Diep was brought to a safe villa owned by the powerful family of an underground kingpin, the parents of a former mafia boss who once saved James's life. Peace seemed within reach, but not for long. The antagonist, John, a former crime lord with a deep grudge against James, secretly tracked down Diep's whereabouts. Although he dared not act recklessly due to the forces protecting her, he had no intention of giving up. Instead, he devised a more cunning, more ruthless plan. Not a direct confrontation, but a brutal strike at James's weakest points, his company, reputation, and career. And now, in today's episode, the real nightmare begins. A series of shocking events unfolds. Confidential documents from James's company are leaked. A major shareholder turns their back on him. The media begins releasing damaging reports, and most alarmingly, a string of key contracts is suddenly canceled without explanation. The company James spent years building is now like a battered ship caught in a storm. He becomes the target of suspicion, betrayal, and public scrutiny. Internal chaos, external pressure. No one knows what's truly happening except John, who pulls the strings from the shadows. His goal is not just to destroy James, but to see him completely crushed, and then take Diep, the trophy he believes he deserves. Meanwhile, Diep remains unaware. She believes James is simply busy with work, still silently waiting for a call, a message, but she has no idea James is fighting in the dark, surrounded by traps and danger. Will James have the strength to resist the evil forces closing in? Will Diep remain safe from the kidnapping scheme John has meticulously planned? And can their love survive this brutal test? Or will fate tear them apart? Stay tuned until the end of today's video to uncover every breath-stealing twist and James's life or death choice in this relentless battle between love, honor, and survival. James's timber workshop, once echoing with the roar of saws and the lively voices of workers day and night, now lies shrouded in a thick fog, gloomy and suffocating. The relentless rains over the past days have not only made transport routes slippery and hard to access, but also forced a temporary blockade of the forests, the main source of timber supply. Locals can no longer enter the woods to harvest, and the volume of incoming wood has nearly hit rock bottom. But that's only half the worry. Timber prices on the market are skyrocketing by the day. Every cubic meter now is as precious as gold. Most small sawmills have shut down. Those still holding on, like James, are forced to calculate every move with surgical precision. One wrong decision, and the whole system could collapse like a line of dominoes. James, the man once hailed in the business world, once so decisive in every deal, now stands quietly by the office window, eyes fixed on the never-ending rain. Deep worry lines carve across his forehead. Every log, every shipment, every advance payment flashes through his mind like a tangled chessboard of moves. In that moment, James isn't just running a timber business. He's keeping the flame alive for an entire small community where faith, livelihood, and hope hang delicately by a single fragile thread. Just when things seemed most hopeless, when every phone call brought bad news, and every sent email met silence, Mr. Wong appeared, the father of Trang, the woman who once nearly became part of James's life. Arrived without notice, a black umbrella trembling in the rain. A worn figure whose presence exuded an unusual calm. His eyes weren't old, they were sharp like a blade. James looked up from his desk, narrowing his eyes. "I didn't expect you'd come, not now." Mr. Wong got straight to the point. "I have 50 tons of timber, clean, dry, high quality. I can deliver within 3 days. Do you dare to take it?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. 50 tons of timber. A number that sounded like a fantasy in times like these, when the entire region was in shortage. and sawmills fought for every cubic meter. Yet here he was, at the very brink of James's downfall, offering something that felt like a gift from the heavens. James froze. He didn't answer right away. Years of business instinct kicked in, too good to be true. The old phrase echoed in his mind. Was this salvation, or a trap carefully set? Because James knew Mr. Nwang wasn't just a timber merchant. He was the same man who once wanted James to marry Trang, a proposal James declined. Because his heart belonged only to Diep. So now, was he returning as a savior or as a debt collector, wielding a sharper game on the chessboard of business? Time was running out. If timber didn't arrive this week, the mill would have to lay off workers. James could lose everything, not just the company, but the trust of the people who relied on him to survive. He looked into Mr. Nwang's eyes. Unreadable, 1 minute, then 2. Finally, James nodded slightly. I'll take it on one condition. The wood must be inspected and delivered to my mill first. No advance payment. A faint smile flickered across Mr. Nwang's lips, whether satisfied or sly. It was impossible to tell. The game had begun. James had either seized a lifeline or stepped into a trap with no escape. While James was battling cold numbers, market pressures, and hidden schemes somewhere far away, Diep was living a peaceful life that felt completely foreign to the world she once knew. That small countryside village, nestled gently against misty hills, had no blaring car horns, no towering lights, no multi-billion-dollar contracts or tense boardroom meetings, only the sound of wind over fields, the midday crow of chickens, and a slow, rustic rhythm like the breath of the earth itself. Diep now lived with an elderly farming couple, the same kind souls who had taken her in after she left the city, broken by past events. The old man had a sprained leg and struggled to walk, so Diep took on almost all the chores in the household, waking early to light the stove, making breakfast with garden vegetables, fresh eggs, and crispy stir-fried leftover rice at noon, crossing through the woods to gather herbs and boil them into medicine by dusk, heading out to the fields to pull weeds and help the old woman with the last of the season's harvest. She had become part of their family, gentle, dedicated, and quiet. The little child in the house, their grandchild, adored Diep. He called her Sister Diep and insisted on sleeping beside her each night. She never minded. She'd hold him close, tell him fairy tales from her childhood, and lull him to sleep with whispers as soft as the evening breeze. No one would believe this young woman had once been at the heart of a whirlwind of money, vengeance, and love. Life seemed so peaceful. Gentle sunny days, children's laughter, the scent of wood smoke mingling with the aroma of the countryside. It felt like it could last forever, but then the storm came without warning. One morning, while the mist still clung to the ground and Diep was quietly harvesting vegetables in the backyard, two unfamiliar men appeared. They were dressed like police officers, yet something about their demeanor felt off. They didn't knock, just stood firmly at the doorstep, their cold eyes sweeping across the house. We received a tip-off, one of them said gruffly. There's a wanted woman here. We demand to search the premises. Diep froze. She had no idea what was happening, but instinct screamed. These were not legitimate officers of the law. The old man stepped out slowly, but with determination. Though his leg was still injured, he planted his cane firmly and stood in the doorway, his gaze stern and weathered from a lifetime of enduring storms. Do you have any documents? A search warrant? An arrest notice? The two men hesitated. A flicker of unease crossed their eyes. But the taller one barked back. This is a matter of national security. No documents required. I served as village chief here for 15 years. What law allows you to act like this? The old man's voice rang out, clear and commanding. If you don't have a warrant, I ask you to leave my land. If not, I'll call the commune police. The tension thickened. Neighbors began peeking over fences. Whispers echoed from afar. The two strangers exchanged glances. After a few silent, heavy seconds, they turned and walked away, without another word. Diep stood frozen, still clutching the crushed bundle of greens in her hand. The old woman gently tugged her arm and led her inside. She didn't ask anything, just softly said, "From now on, don't go anywhere alone." No one in the house mentioned that morning again, but from that day forward, everything quietly changed. The old man began locking the front gate earlier each night. The porch light stayed on until morning. The little boy no longer wandered far from the yard. That afternoon, the forest still lingered with the misty scent of last night's rain. The sun blazed high, its light piercing through the canopy, casting shimmering patches of golden glow on the damp earth below. Diep carried a bundle of freshly picked medicinal leaves on her back. Though the forest trail was rough and muddy, her clothes stained, sweat soaking through the back of her shirt. She walked slowly, quietly, just like the life she now lived. And then, a car engine echoed through the stillness of the woods. A familiar SUV pulled up along the grassy roadside, coated in dust, yet unmistakably marked by someone who once belonged to another world. James, he stepped out, no suit, no tie, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair tousled, dark circles beneath his eyes from countless sleepless nights. But when he saw Diep, his eyes softened. They looked at each other, no words needed. Then James walked over, gently took the bundle from her back and unshouldered it. "I thought I'd have to go to the ends of the earth to find you," he said softly, "but turns out you were always closer to me than anyone else." They walked together to a small thatched tea shack near the forest edge, where the old man often came to drink tea with other village elders. The place was quiet, only the sound of cicadas and the rustling breeze. They sat across from each other between the breath of the forest, a steaming teacup, and the golden light of dusk. "You've lost weight," Diep said, her voice gentle as wind. James gave a faint smile, his gaze distant. "The company feels like a ship in a storm. At times I wondered, should I let it all go? But then I thought of you and our little farm." They spoke of that plot of land outside the city where they once had a vegetable garden, a tiny chicken coop, and a dog named Hockey who used to sunbathe on the porch. Back then, James wasn't a CEO. Diep wasn't running from anything. They were just two people living simply, planting, cooking, occasionally arguing when Hockey ran off with James's new shoes. "No matter what happens, I'll stay by your side," Diep said, her voice steady, grounded. Her hand rested lightly on his, warm, real. James looked at her long and deeply, as if trying to etch every detail of her face into his heart. He smiled, a weary smile, yet behind it was overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you for not turning away, for still being you, even when I have nothing left." That evening, after their heartfelt reunion at the little tea house beneath the forest canopy, Diep quietly returned to the humble home where she had taken refuge. Twilight had fallen. Along the rocky footpath, the chirping of crickets blended with the soft whisper of wind through the bamboo walls. Familiar sounds of a peaceful countryside. Diep lit the fire. The gentle crackle of the flames felt like a warm breath within the here. She cooked a simple meal, mustard green soup, slices of braised tofu, and a few pieces of stewed fish, humble dishes, yet filled with the devotion of a daughter at heart. The old man sat by the wooden bed frame, his injured legs still wrapped, smiling softly as Diep applied herbal balm and rewrapped the sprain with forest leaves. "Having you here makes the house feel warm again," he said, his eyes shining with the affection of a father for his own daughter. The old woman fussed endlessly, refusing to let Diep wash the dishes, but eventually gave in, letting Diep gently clean her hands and feet before massaging them with a warm herbal soak. The whole house was fragrant with herbs, with steaming rice, and with a love that had no name but was felt in every corner. When all the chores were done, night had fallen deep. Diep poured herself a warm cup of water and stepped out onto the porch. sitting quietly and gazing at a sky full of stars. Something the city had never allowed her to see in its full glory. Then, her phone vibrated softly. Caller ID. James, are you home yet? His voice came through, low, warm, and gentle, though tinged with exhaustion. I am in one piece. And you? Diep replied with a soft smile. On the other end, James leaned back against his car seat, pulled over by the roadside where the signal was strong enough to call. I'm heading back. Big meeting tomorrow. But I feel better knowing you're safe. They spoke a few more words, nothing grand. Just that the greens she picked today were a bit tough. The old man said she shouldn't climb tall trees anymore, and that Hockey, their old dog, must be pretty gray by now. And then the quiet reminders, don't go to the stream alone, remember to lock the door. If anything feels strange, call me right away in this remote little village. Through unpredictable rain and sun, even with unseen dangers looming, they held on to each other with the simplest things, a question of care, a word of caution, a call before bed. Outside, the storm might still be coming, unseen threats still lurked. Puppet strings still pulled from the shadows, but through all the chaos, one thing remained untouched, the love and trust that James and Diep still held for each other. Will this fragile peace last? Will the next storm sweep it all away, or lead them to an escape? Find out in the next episode. Tomorrow, the journey is far from over, and the truth has only just begun to reveal itself.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Mọi người ơi, thì do hôm nay mình có việc bận nên là hôm qua mình không có lên được video về LyTuDiep. Hôm nay mình mới bắt đầu lên một tập phim mới về LyTuDiep. Thì cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều vì đã ủng hộ kênh của mình trong thời gian qua, luôn theo dõi kênh của mình một cách đầy đủ các video. Mọi người ơi, nếu như mọi người yêu quý kênh cũng như là ủng hộ kênh thì mọi người hãy like, share cũng như là để lại bình luận ở trên kênh mọi người nhé. Và nếu như mà mọi người có ý kiến thắc mắc hay là mọi ý kiến đóng góp gì thì mọi người cũng có thể để ở phần bình luận để góp ý với kênh mình luôn. Và ở trong tập này, LyTuDiep và với James thì đã bị tên John hãm hại và kế hoạch của hắn đang càng ngày càng thâm độc hơn. Vậy thì diễn biến câu chuyện sẽ như thế nào và liệu James và LyTuDiep có cùng nhau vượt qua được hay không thì mọi người hãy đón xem vào tập tiếp theo ở ngày mai mọi người nhé. Và kênh mình thì sẽ cố gắng ra mỗi ngày một tập video về LyTuDiep để cho mọi người theo dõi. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong video tiếp theo nha.